something I need you to know before we read that story. Think about, okay, not my lifetime, not even when my mom was a little girl, not when her mom was a little girl, but when my great-grandma was a little girl, life was very different for women than it is right now. At that time in life, only the men could make the rules. And because only men could make rules, women didn't have any power or control. They couldn't have any money in their own names. They could not have a house in their own name. In many cases, they could not have a job or make much money at all. Now, you just wrote a minute ago about how that would make you feel if just playing, just going outside and playing, but the other group of people, all the girls were in charge, or for you, all the boys were in charge, and you didn't find it fair, and it didn't feel good. Now imagine every decision about your life was picked by somebody else. Well, this is what was happening when my great-grandma was a little girl. And the women became very upset by this. And so they started to come together. They worked in groups. They decided if they could vote, they could change the laws. And if they could change the laws, they could change these rules that they didn't like. But they could change no rules if they could not vote. So they came together as a group and worked together to protest peacefully, to say, we want the right to vote. We are helpers here. Just like you guys wrote in your articles, if I'm helping, if I'm a part of the team, I should get part of the say. And that's what these women were doing. They were saying, I am part of this country, I do the work, I want the rights, so I need the right to vote. Because if I can vote, I can pick the rules. But I need you to know something. Not all men, but many men were as strongly against this idea as the women were for this idea. And so they started some of their own groups opposing the right for women to vote. That's what women's suffrage is. And so these are true pictures of that time period. Groups coming together, some for this idea and some against this idea. And women to draw attention to their need and their passion, because they believed very strongly that this was fair and this was right. They would go to polls anyway where you could cast a vote. And if those women put their ballot, their vote, in the box, they were immediately arrested. And so moms and sisters and aunts and friends were going together peacefully in groups, and they were making a decision to vote, even if it would put them in jail. And the beautiful thing was that rich and poor, old and young, were coming together for a common cause, a cause that they believed would make life better for everyone and life fairer for everyone. It started small, but it spread. And slowly throughout our country, more and more women joined this charge. And they held rallies and they held protests and they went to important events and they made it with patience and persistence so that their voice was heard. And the story that we're reading today is about Elizabeth, who was one of the first women to start this movement. Today, our question is, how can readers like you and me describe the impact that heroes like Elizabeth from history have had on people, on events, and on the world around them? We're going to study Elizabeth today. And in order to be successful in this standard, you're going to have to do these four things. To be successful, you will you read this with me, please? Notice the characters or important events that impact our main character. So that means that we're going to watch other people, other events happen in Elizabeth's life, and we're going to notice how that's changing her. Number 2, read with me. Notice how they impact our main character. That's how it's changing her. Number 3, describe what this leads to or why it is important. So we're going to not just notice her, and we're not just going to notice who she comes into contact with or what happens in her life. We're going to study what happens next. After it changes her, what happens next? What does it lead to? And then number 4, eyes right here. Take turns speaking and listening closely to others' ideas. A large part of our lesson today is going to be you working together, using the anchor chart, using my support, but especially using each other's support. And if you're not listening closely, if you're not taking turns speaking and sharing ideas or asking questions, you're going to struggle to be successful today. Are there any questions for me before we begin? Okay, so before we begin, I want you to turn and tell your partners what we need to do to be successful, and 2 student points if I can hear anyone sharing what we can use to help us be successful today. Are you ready? Long as hair, turn and talk.